Part number 36A from 1919. Strange to think it's over 100 years old. That at some point it was brand new, sat in a box waiting for some child to take it out and use it for the first time. Hi! If you want even more Meccano goodness, why don't you check out my Patreon channel? And please like and subscribe and leave a comment below. I post updates in the community section, not only for this week's Patreon build, but also for what I'm currently working on. Thank you, and back to the build. Hi and welcome back. As I write this script in April of 2022, which will air sometime in August, this channel went live. And all the fears that it won't work, I'm not going to get anywhere, are very present in my mind at this point. Fear is the unknown. It is your brain's attempt to plan for what cannot be planned for. And I have no idea of how I'm going to get on. After all, this is nearly 3 years of developing the idea of the channel and learning how to film, edit, script write, research and manage the project. It's also overcoming a lot of preset biases that I have about myself. Honestly, I don't think I have the ability. And watching my first video, I cringe, but that was filmed in 2019. And while I have a long journey to go to improve what I'm doing, I think I am improving. But we will see if this video gets better engagement than my first one is. For all of us, though, that fear of stepping off the cliff edge is always the hardest point. Whether it is literally stepping off the edge of the cliff, I have no idea how a base jumper can do that. Or that moment of starting a new business. After a time, you have to stop planning and do the doing. Or step back and hide, do something easier, because at the end of the day, you're scared of the idea of failing. But here's the thing, there is no failure if you've tried. When I was 18, I went self-employed, providing gardening services. I survived 1 year and then wrapped the business up. My father's comments were so cutting at the time, it created a rift that took 15 years to heal, and was a catalyst for me leaving home in a way that worried both my parents. But looking at my business at 18, it paid for me to learn to drive, and was the financial savings behind my first car. It taught me what not to do in business. So when I went self-employed again, nearly 20 years later, I made a success out of it, even starting a second business to run alongside the first one. So, was it a failure? We learn from our lessons if we have the sight to do so. Do not be afraid of what you haven't done yet, because if you don't reach, your life will be more comfortable. But you don't get to feel that moment of the free fall, the moment of sheer panic and the joy that follows as you realise the freedom of what you're experiencing. My greatest passion in life is that of useless information, wasting my time learning seemingly trivial history. But knowledge is never trivial and learning is never wasted. We've all seen boom lifts or cherry pickers in our day-to-day lives, but have you ever considered the history behind them? The man behind this invention is J. Ettle, an American, who in his spare time built hot rod cars from his Corvair fitted with a V12 Jaguar engine to a 3/4 scale Ford Roadster with a supercharged Ford Flathead V8 fitted. Aged 26, he spent the summer of 1944 picking cherries. At the time, you would place a ladder against a tree, climb up, pick the cherries you could reach, climb down, reposition the ladder, climb back up, etc. Repeating the task became frustrating and tedious quickly. Mr. Ettle was around one of 8 companies tackling the challenge. The aerial lift truck had been around for nearly 40 years by the time it was redesigned. But the best way to view the first design is that of a scissor lift, a platform that rises above the bed of a vehicle. While the theory is good and is still being used, it does have drawbacks, namely that of not allowing the operator to work beyond the footprint of the vehicle it's fitted to. What Mr. Ettle designed was a completely new vehicle, that of a bucket attached to a telescopic boom fixed to the bed of the truck. This allowed working on either side as well as to the rear of the vehicle, thus increasing the footprint in which the vehicle can operate. He worked on evenings and weekends to perfect the design, starting his own company in the late 1940s called Telstar Corps. With the bucket lift designed for fruit picking at first, as that was the foundation of his frustration, the name Cherry Picker stuck. But it was quickly snapped up by anybody working at height, with numerous tree surgeons seeing the benefit immediately. However, one of the other companies that saw the benefit was the Bell Telephone Company. It is without a doubt that the Cherry Picker helped to modernise the communication infrastructure of not just America, but the whole world. Without the frustration of a summer picking fruit in 1944, the ability to improve on the outdated Victorian period telegraph equipment that was the backbone of the emerging modern world would have been a lot slower, as one of the main benefits of Mr. Ettle's design was the ability to feed cable straight to working height with ease, therefore speeding up the process at which the outdated equipment could be replaced. But for all that, this model is based on a hydraulic system to raise and lower it, so not the telescopic boom that Mr. Ettle designed. The names of Walter E. Thornton Trump and John L. Grove were 2 more of the people working on the same problem, but from a different angle. The use of hydraulics to raise and lower the work platform is so obviously simple. The technology dates back to 6000 BC in ancient Mesopotamia. Around 1650, the French physicist Blaise Pascal discovered that when fluid is compressed, it exerts an equal force in all directions. Pascal's law was a groundbreaking discovery that has led the way for most of our construction industry's heavy equipment to date. And in its current form, we use various oils instead of water. The reason behind the change to oil is down to the behaviour of the fluid under pressure. Under pressure, oil will not heat up as quickly as water, and therefore also not evaporate as quickly. It will handle a much higher load than water, whereas Mr. Ettle's design used wire cable to power the jib arm's movement. A hydraulic cylinder is more accurate and will not stretch over time in the way a cable will. Against that is the failure of both hydraulic lines and cylinders, always at the worst, most inconvenient time. Hydraulic cylinders will also provide around 10 times more amount of power than that of an electric motor, so are ideal for pushing, pulling and lifting things. The marriage of hydraulics to the lifting arm of the platform gave us the boom lift. Mr. Thornton Trump named it the Giraffe, but the name never stuck. Maybe it was just too much of a stretch. The action of the cylinder in this model is nicely done, I think. At first I was completely puzzled by the instructions, which, to be honest, is not always that uncommon in most things for me at times. The movement of having a double angle bracket slide back and forth on a number 5 perforated strip makes for a very smooth action. The amount of tolerance needed between it being just too tight or just too loose, as always appeals to the tinkering side of my nature. The power provided by the crank handle movement didn't seem to work at first, but as is normally the case with cable drums of any type in Meccano, it's just about getting the winding just right. At the time of this kit being produced in 1970, this technology was new. The hydraulic cylinder being used in this manner was cutting edge still. After all, it is only some 15 years of production since the first one came off the line. And maybe that's why it looks strange. The prototype is based on the truck beds of the 1950s and 1960s. The mechanism, the then engineering behind that first one, is still being thought through by the designers. For modern boom lifts look very different to this model. But also the problem that Meccano faced, not just with this kit, but in the Army and Superhighways kit, comes to bear here. And that is the cab. It is the generic feature for all the builds of these 3 kits, being used in all 8 of these builds, 5 of the 8 Army builds and 2 of the 8 Superhighway builds. Strangely, for the 1970 combat set, they managed to get away from using the cab completely. Now we have computer-controlled hydraulics that allow for a pre-planned movement or millimetre precision, as technology and engineering merge together to provide the best possible combination. I said at the beginning, my greatest passion in life is that of useless information, wasting my time learning seemingly trivial history, but knowledge is never trivial and learning is never wasted. The knowledge that comes out of the research of these scripts is a real high point in my day, along with frustration of not being able to discuss all the possibilities. There are just so many rabbit holes to go down here. After all, the work of the Chinese hydraulic engineers Sun Shi Ao and Zemen Bao, along with some other 10 or so engineers, is inspiring. Their work dates back to around 3,000 years ago. The more I start to look into the prototypes that the Meccano models are based on, the more I realise how much innovation and design carries us forward, how engineering is interlinked into every part of our daily life. The work that people like Pascal and Ettel and co. did has allowed us to advance into the information revolution of the 1980s, so that our digitally integrated life in the early part of the 21st century seems so normal. And yet, not that long ago, I can still remember the first time I sat down with the grandstand Astro Wars console game and watched the pixels play across the screen. This model would never have been built by me as a child. It would have seemed too complicated. The history behind the invention would have been unknown, and quite possibly, to me at that point, uninspiring. The engineering would have been beyond my scope to be able to comprehend. And here I am at 50, knowing a little bit more about how I'm able to sit at a pedestal desk, a design that is 400 years old and my father made for me around 15 years ago, using technology that would have left my grandparents speechless. All of this is underpinned by countless inventors and engineers that have designed and built our world, one innovation at a time. And if I can learn about just a few of them, then I've improved my understanding of my world.